And she did for 2 weeks. Our neighbours, the friends that we had, and the church produced this rota. It was like, let's help the Artheys. And they brought us meals, they provided transport, they helped around the house. We did have to change the rota because this was Texas and the meals were enormous. So we had to go to every other day. Yeah. There was a gentleman in the church who was a builder, and he said, again, don't worry, I will do all the modifications to your house. So he built a wheelchair ramp up to the front door. He widened the family bathroom doorway, and he put up support rails in the bathroom. And the church paid for the materials. And Doug said, all my labour is free of charge. Obviously, we had lots of friends all around the world praying for us. And I can't tell you how tangible that was. We could actually feel that powerful prayer. And for us, it was like being carried. It was like floating on a mattress above the circumstances. I'd been in a US Bible study for ladies, and they brought me this book of God's promises. And I remember reading a promise a day and just trying to hang on to it. We had an embarrassing number of flowers and lots of encouraging cards. And because I'm a teacher, I got messages from the children I'd worked with. So one day, a big brown envelope arrived in my ward, and it was from the UK. They were the 6 and 7-year-olds, and they'd written me letters. And one little girl said, "Dear Mrs. Arthey, I was so sad to hear about your bad crash. I hope you don't have another one." Well, I knew what she meant. But a few days later, another big brown envelope, but this time it was from the kindergarten class in America where I'd been volunteering. Now, these children were a year younger, so the teacher had written things for them to write in their cards. Things like, "Get better soon, we miss you." But one little girl, and this is where God speaks through children so often, and it really moved me. It still moves me today. As I opened her card, quite independently, she wrote, "Do you see a rainbow?" And on the back, she drew this beautiful rainbow. And that was just God's message to me of hope.
Something else that really came home to us was that we can't expect to understand everything. And this is the why me question. Why me with this motorcycle accident? I've ridden machines all my life. I like to think I was a careful rider. I'd never crashed a machine in my life before. I've been on these safe rider courses with the British Motorcycle Police, where a police rider follows you for 20 minutes and then you stop and he runs through your riding style and tells you what you can improve. And then you do it again and again. And gradually your riding style becomes even better and even safer. So I've done all that. I've never had a speeding ticket, either on a motorcycle or in a car, in my life. Still haven't. I did get a parking ticket once, but we were on our honeymoon and I think I must have been distracted. We had the right gear on. It was a well-planned trip. We weren't in any hurry. We were taking plenty of breaks. And why would this happen when I've got my precious wife on the pillion? All the thousands, tens of thousands of miles I've ridden on motorcycles in my life. Why would it happen on the rare occasion when Denise is with me? Well, I have this list. It's a list of things that Chris does not understand. And this why me question, why us on this motorcycle accident, is pretty much at the top of the list. And the reason I have this list is because when it's my time to go and I go to heaven, I'm taking that list with me because I want some answers. I have a feeling, though, that when I get there, I'll probably toss the list away because it won't matter then. You may know there's this scripture in 1 Corinthians that says, "Now we see but the poor reflection, then we shall see face to face. Now I only know in part, then I will know fully, even as I'm fully known." So there will come a time when the why me question will be answered. But for now, we've learned that we have to be okay with not understanding everything. It's not our time.
We learned as well the importance of perseverance. We had to work really hard getting as much functionality back as possible, not just learning to walk on new legs, but getting full range of motion back in our arms and hands. And that was very painful. We couldn't supinate or pronate. And we soon discovered if you can only turn your hand like that, you can't actually pick up a plate of food. You can't, if you have a shower, the shower gel and everything just runs off your hands unless you tip sideways. If you can't pronate, it's really hard to use a computer keyboard. And in my case, it's hard to play the piano. They used to say to us, make a fist, and that's all we could do. And we used to actually take 10 minutes to force a finger down onto the palm of our hands. Now, we should say now that we're highly competitive. So we would watch films and they would be interspersed with, hey, I've got a finger down. And one day I actually decided to add up all the exercises, therapy exercises we were doing, both in the hospital and at home for homework. And it came to 4 hours a day. And we had to eat and sleep, and we did an awful lot of sleeping. But you have to stick at therapy, even if it feels hopeless. And I was using my right arm just now, but my left arm, we got it all back.
Yeah.
We can do everything, including playing the piano.
We learnt a lot about what it's like to be disabled in a world full of able-bodied people. And I hope that's improved our understanding of how to relate to people who have disabilities. Just give an example of what it's like being in a wheelchair. One day we had to go to, well, I had to go to the the therapy hospital to talk about my program of treatment.
He's coming. Jesus is coming. I can't wait to hear the trumpet call. He's coming. Jesus is coming. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord of all. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord of all.
And a neighbour took me. And then I realised in the reception area that my neighbour was talking to the receptionist, and they were both standing up and having a conversation about my treatment. And I was sitting in the wheelchair and I wasn't part of the conversation. And it was astonishing, really. So I stood up out of the wheelchair on my one leg and joined the conversation. And now suddenly it's the three of us talking about my program of treatment. And I really don't think the receptionist or my neighbour had really noticed what had happened at all. It was as if being in a wheelchair and sitting down, I'd become invisible. So I really hope that it's improved our understanding around other disabled people. And if we have the next picture. That's great. Now, this photo was taken very soon after we got our first prosthetic legs. You can see that Denise has the walking frame and I'm still using a walking stick, but we're standing and we're walking on our own.
It's really hard to put into words what an emotional moment it was when we got our prosthetic legs for the first time. It really caught me by surprise. After months in a wheelchair, just standing upright on two legs again was incredible.
Yeah. Okay, we'll finish with the photo now. Great. Of course, it really emphasized for us how important it is to have a hope and a future. And our theme tune has become Psalm 124. This is the psalm that says, if the Lord had not been on our side, then things would have overwhelmed us and we couldn't have coped. But because he's on our side, it's as if the net has been broken and we've escaped like a bird out of the snare. We've escaped. And it's true, we have. Because the Lord was on our side, we did escape. So a question for you. If your heart stopped beating in the next 5 minutes, do you know without a shadow of a doubt where you would spend eternity? Now, the driver of the white truck behind us, who I mentioned almost died twice, after the second time his heart stopped and they brought him round again, he realized that he had some business to do with his maker. And he went to the Lord and found his faith as a result of the accident. As for us, I mean, we were okay. We could have died, and we nearly did, but we've both loved and served the Lord since we were little children. The Lord's always been around. And so we would have gone, there would have been no pain. We would have gone straight to heaven. People would have said nice things about us. We were a popular couple in our mid-50s. They would have put flowers on our graves. No problem for us. But it would have been awful for our youngsters. And what about the assignment on our lives? We have to believe that the reason we're still here, the reason we survived, is because the assignment that we have on our lives is not finished yet. It may not be the assignment that we originally had in mind. It may be more along the lines of what we're doing right now, which is talking to people and saying that even if terrible things happen, you don't have to be under the circumstances, but you can rise above them, and how that's possible with God's help.
If you told us beforehand this was going to happen, I think, one, we wouldn't have got on the plane, but two, we would have probably told you that we didn't think our faith was strong enough to hold up, to cope with this. But it was amazing. From the moment we surfaced in hospital, we were so aware of God's presence in the room. It was like everything had been stripped away. You know, we couldn't move. And but the Lord was left. Only the Lord was left. And I remember one day when Chris came up to my ward in his wheelchair, and he had tears streaming down his face. And I said, whatever's the matter? And he said, he looked down at his body and he said, you know, this reminds me that Jesus's body was broken for us. And it was as if Jesus wasn't just with us. It was that we suddenly knew in a whole wonderful way that he understood. He understood our suffering because he'd suffered himself and suffered far worse than we had. He understood the frustration. He understood the unfairness. And it's like he sees our sorrow and he weeps with us. It was such a bonding, such a comfort to have a God like that. And scriptures kept coming to mind. Now, obviously, I've been to church since I was a little girl, and I never knew half these scriptures were in my head. But that's something that you're told will happen, and it happened. And I managed to write one of them down. This is the scripture I hung on to. All things will work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purposes. And that's in Romans 8:28. And while Chris was in his coma, I got the Pastor Frankie, to actually read it over Chris and write it up and pin it in his ward, because I just felt I wanted to declare that over Chris. And, you know, all things have worked together for good. For a number of years, the first thing we would see in the morning was the wheelchair beside the bed. And that was the first choice of the day. You had to get up, get in the wheelchair, start moving around. So each day really became a series of choices.
He's coming. Jesus is.
Life Stories.
And we found if you put enough good choices together, you get a good day. Enough good days together, you get a good week. And if you continue, you can build a good life again.
One of those choices that we have to make is around our identity. And I think this is something that I struggled with more than you did, Denise. I felt in the early days as if the accident had taken away from me almost everything of who I thought I was. I mean, I always had this self-image as being, a bit adventurous, but at the same time, very competent and careful. Well, I clearly blown that with the accident. And then, of course, I saw myself as an athlete, as a marathon runner. And looking down at my one leg, I thought, well, that's the end of that. That's gone. And at work, I used to think I was fairly capable. I was holding my own with some phenomenal engineers and project managers. Just loved the work, loved challenging myself. When they brought me out of the coma, I couldn't read a clock. I couldn't use a phone. There wasn't a lot happening. I could barely feed myself, and I was like dribbling food. So at that point, I had to decide that my value doesn't come from what I can achieve, but my value comes from who I am. So even without these things that I saw myself achieving, it didn't matter. I'm still a valuable person. I'm still known. I'm still loved. I'm still understood. I'm still a child of God. And that was an identity choice that I had to make every day. And in fact, it's an identity choice that we still have to make today. It's who we are, not what we can achieve.
Another important choice, a big one, was forgiveness. The sentencing trial was a year after the accident, and the drunk driver at the end of it, he came over to see us, and he had tears in his eyes, and he said, "I can't give you your legs back. I'm so sorry." He said, "But can you ever forgive me?" Surprisingly, we never felt any bitterness towards him, and we've had enough to cope with. Yeah. We didn't want to struggle with bitterness and anger. We wanted to put all our energy into recovering. And we said to him, actually, we forgave you in hospital a year ago. He had a very short prison sentence, and then he had 10 years probation. And we kept in touch with him. We decided to go and visit him in prison. We had lunch with him and his wife before we left America. He wanted that, so we said yes. And we were able to reassure him again that as far as we're concerned, he's forgiven. In 2019, he wrote us a lovely email which thanked us for our kindness and support, because he said that really has helped him cope over the 10 years. And then this September, we went back to Texas, and we had a meal with him and his wife again. And he really surprised us. At the end of the meal, he said, well, the next time you come to Texas, come and stay with us. And, we're still discovering the remarkable power of forgiveness, both for us and for him.
Now, obviously, we're disabled and that brings complications, but we're quite aware that there'll be a number of people who are watching us now who have physical disabilities, but also maybe other disabilities as well. Maybe grief or depression, worries about finances, relationships, maybe addictions. So we're not the only ones who have a burden to carry. But in John 16:33, Jesus himself says, in this world you will have trouble. Not you might have trouble, you will have trouble. But then, of course, he goes on to say, take heart, I've overcome the world. Now, that's not quite the end of our story. And we've got another picture coming up, which will help us. About a year and a half after the accident, I took delivery of my first running leg. You can see it's one of these carbon fiber Blade Runner legs. And straight away, I signed up for my first 5-kilometer race as an amputee. I was very unfit, so I had to partly walk and partly run it. But I finished in less than 50 minutes. I didn't fall down, and I wasn't last. And that was the start of a return to endurance sports. So if we take that photograph off. So since then, I've actually completed 2 full marathons in this new configuration. It's as if the Lord said, Chris, I know running was important to you, and because I love you, I'm going to give you the running back again. And he did. And I got a cycling leg and learned to cycle again. I even learned to swim again. I find that I can swim breaststroke, but every time I kick, I turn left. So freestyle is much more effective because I can swim in a straight line. So with the swimming, the cycling and the running, of course, I'm doing triathlons. I've been in the British Para-Triathlon Championships 3 times now. And when we were in Texas a few weeks ago, I completed a half Ironman, which is 1.2 mile open water swim, 56 miles on the bike, and then a half marathon, which that's another miracle that a 67-year-old man with one leg can get around that sort of thing. And there's a retirement present. If we could have the next picture. When I was 60, a retirement and birthday present was to have a go at Kilimanjaro. You can probably work out which one I am. Actually, our second son, Tom, came with us on that trek, and he's the 3rd one in line. So that was halfway up Kilimanjaro. And while you're finding the next picture, we had a bit more climbing to do, and then finally we got to the summit of Kilimanjaro, and that photograph should just be coming.
He's coming. Jesus is coming. I can't wait to hear the trumpet call. He's coming. Jesus is coming. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord of all.